Hilchis Avodim Perik Sheni. Avedivri Shemochru Bezin and also Bahamecher Atzmei, both of them, is Nikne Bekesef B'Shaveh Kesef. There's a kinyan of Kesef, and that could be with either Kesef or Shaveh Kesef. And also there's a kinyan B'Shtar. Now, Ketzet B'Shtar, what would be the tzir of the shtar? Kesef Le Ala Niyor El Acheres Hareini Mochru L'cha Hareini Koni L'cha V'Nesun Le Yashtar. So it's the Avedivri himself writes the shtar. Or sometimes you have a mitzvah of a shtar where the buyer buys the shtar. That's B'emes B'Negea a shtar kedushin, where the Baal gives the shtar to the Isha. Masha'inkin, the musig of a shtar by an Eved, we learn out from Soda. By a Soda is the Meicher gives the shtar. So the Meicher gives the shtar. So over here also the Eved is the one that writes the shtar. Hareini mochru l'cha, hareini koni l'cha, v'neisen le'ashtar. Now the Maisa is the Rambam just writes that seer, hareini mochru l'cha, hareini koni l'cha. Now, by Mecher Atzmei is Pasha, that's what he has to write. Areini Mochru L'cha. But again, Mochru Bezin L'chur, it's not so clear who writes the shtar. So there are more brings. He brings from the Meiri, he brings from others, from Achreinim, that by Mochru Bezin, the Bezin is the one that writes the shtar. But the Maisa is the Rambam doesn't say it. I mean, the Lashon Rambam is Kesevle Ala Niyore El Acheres Hareini Mochru L'cha, Hareini Koni L'cha. L'chur, if the din would be that by Mochru Bezin. So Bezin is the one that writes the shtar. So L'chura, the Rambam should have said it. L'chura. So Mamela, you could say that no, Bezin insists that he writes the shtar because Lepeil, Bezin is just making sure that he's being sold. But it's not the pshat is that the Bezin owns him Mamela, so Bezin is the ones that can write the shtar. L'chura al b'pashtus. And now you could start also thinking about kesef. How does it work with the kesef? Who gets the kesef? So the Rambam doesn't say nikne bekesef b'shalom kesef. Pashtus, the buyer gives the kesef. Who does he give the kesef to? So by Mecher Atzmei Fashtetzach, he gives the kesef to the Eved. Benegea Bezin by Machru Bezin. So the pashtus would be that he gives it to Bezin. But over there you could say that Bezin is taking on behalf of the Eved because the Eved owes the money to the Eved owes the money to the Nignav. So mainly they're taking that money on behalf of the Eved. Masha'inkin, if you're writing a shtar, to write the shtar, you have to be the Bailam. Bezin is not the Bailam. Bezin has a right to go ahead and sell him, but Mehechotesa to say that the Bezin is a Bailam, that they can write a shtar. Halacha base. Machru Bezin, by Machru Bezin, Oived Sheish Shonim Miyei Michurasis. So that's the din that our Evedivri is Nimka L'Sheish, and that special din is only by Machru Bezin. And Ubetchilas Hashviyah Shalei Yatsa Ben Chenes. So in other words, it's not we go according to the years. Marshal, sometimes you say Mixas Hashon and Nikrishona, and the year changes when it comes Tishrei. Over here, Benigeo Machru Bezin, the year begins when he's actually sold, and it ends when it comes back to that day that he was sold. Machru Bezin Eved Sheishonim Yei Michurasei Ubetchilas Hashon Hashviyah Shalei, when the seventh year begins of his seventh year, which means when it comes back to the day that he was sold, is then is Yotze Ben Chen. Now, if during those 6 years there was Shemitah, is also a Rezevet, because Shemitah doesn't play a role in this din of Mechiras Evedivri. Aval Poga B'Shnas HaYevel, Masha'inkin Yevel, Afil Nimka Sho'achas Lefnei HaYevel, is Hareze Yetzel Lecheresh. Shnam Ad Shnas HaYevel Yab Medimoch, B'Shnas HaYevel Azeis V'Gemer. So we learn out that the Pesukim say that the Shnas HaYevel and Evedivri goes out. Is a Machru Bezin is sold for 6 years. 6 years means 6 years miyoim liyoim. Shemitah is not a factor over here. Masha'inkin, if during those 6 years Yevel occurs, so then he's Yoytze B'Yevel. That's Benegea Machru Bezin. However, HaMoicher Atzmei, this is Benegea Machru Bezin, so the din is that it's always Sheish. Machru Bezin can't sell not for less than Sheish, not for more than Sheish. But there's a din that if Paga B'Yevel, so Yevel is Meitze. HaMoicher Atzmei is Yeshle Limkir Atzmei Liyesel Sheish. He could sell himself for more than Sheish. There's no Hagbala that he has to sell himself only for 6 years. Now the Rambam doesn't write that he could sell himself for less than 6 years. The Rambam only writes that he could sell himself for more than Sheish. So the Rambam brings that from the Ritva that Uadini can sell himself for less than Sheish. Now there is a the Aruch HaShulchan says in Shitas HaRambam that he can sell himself for less than Sheish. But Al Kopon in the Rambam itself it doesn't say. The Rambam only says HaMecher Atzmi Yesh Limker Atzmi Liesel Sheish. Could be that the Gedera and Evedivri can't be less than Sheish. It's only Chiddush is that it could also be more than Sheish. Now, Harei shemocher atzmei le'eser shanim le'esrim shanim. He made clearly, in other words, he's a mocher atzmei, and he said clearly he's selling himself for 10 years or 20 years. And lepeil uspaga be'ayevel afilo achar shana. So the din is haretza yetza be'yevel. Shenemar ad shnas hayevel yavedimach. So in other words, even though they made up to sell him for more, but that doesn't override the hafkah of yevel. Yevel is mafkir the din of evedivri. Halacha dalet. Echad hamecher atzmei shemachru bezdin. And lepeil ubarach. He ran away while he was an eved. So he owes his Odin 6 years of work. He's an Evedivri. So if let's say Machru Bezin, for sure he owes his Odin 6 years of work. And al derezeh by Mocher Atzmei, the pastors were talking in a case where there was 6 years of work. So the din is chayiv lahashlim sheish. So the Rambam brings from Achreinim that the Rambam speaks about chayiv lahashlim sheish. By Mocher Atzmei he could be more than sheish. So the chayiv lahashlim, the nekudas advarim is that there is a chayiv lahashlim. When a person bought work, so he didn't only buy these years of work. The Eved has a chiyuv to give him work, 6 years of work. Lepel v'mpaga beyevel is yotze lecheres, because yevel is mafkia. It's not the pshat is the kinyan was only liel. No, yevel is mafkia. So memela, even though be'etzim he owed him work. So just like by a regular case of 6 years, he sold him, like we said before, he sold him for 10 years or 20 years. So lepel lechuri owes him 10 or 20 years of work. That's what he paid him for. But nevertheless, Yevel is mafkia, just like some Musik Yevel is mafkia. So al derev zeh, so even though Lepeil, he owes him 6 years of work, but Yevel is mafkia, that chiyuv, memela, from then onwards, he doesn't owe him anymore. Halacha hey, chola, if he became ill, ben shechola shona achar shona, shechola chaloi mekutonim, whether he was ill one long extended period of time, or there was different illnesses, but different parts, im hakel pachas me'arba shonim, if his illness didn't exceed, it wasn't 4 years, it was less than 4 years, wasn't 4 years, didn't actually reach 4 years, so then oilan lamin yeshesh. So then we say, Elapel, since he worked, and he worked to say more than 2 years, he worked 2 years plus going into the third year, so then it's oilan lamin yeshesh, it says if he worked all 3 years. So if he ran away, so even if he runs away for a year, he has to pay him back, he has to give him work for that year. But if he became ill, so there's a special limud, there's limudim, that we learn now that as long as he wasn't ill for 4 years, which means he worked for 2 years plus, he went into the third year, so it's elam yishesh. Avalim chol arba shonim. So if he didn't even work for more than 2 years, in other words, that he was chol arba shonim, so there was never a third year of work, even partial of the third year, so then it's chayiv lahashim kol yimei acheli, then he has to be mashim kol yimei acheli. Shenama kisacher kiseishav, and we learn out from a pasuk that a sacher, there's a pasuk that says that a sacher of shalish shanim. So memela we learn out that once he worked for 3 years, so he goes into the gather of a sacher. So memela, so he was yotze his work. This is a special din by achel. It's nachamo. If he became ill, so if he was ill for 4 complete years, so then he's potter, and then he has to pay back his then fakert he has to pay, he has to be mashlim. Masha'enken, if he wasn't ill for complete 4 years, in other words, he worked for 3 years. 3 years, even he didn't work the whole of the third year, so he goes into the gather of a sacher. We learn out from a pasuk that he goes into the gather of a sacher, and the pasuk says, Kisacher kiseshav yeh imach. So from there we learn out that as long as he worked 3 years, or at least part of the third year, so he doesn't have to be mashlim beyond that, if it was chola. Now that's talking about if lay paga b'yevel. However, if in paga b'yevel, if he's paga b'yevel, even if he was sick for 4 years, is yosef, just like we learned before, that when a person knows any chiyuv that he has to work towards his adon is nifka through yevel. So even though he had, just like when he's an avid himself, avid kipshutin, is within the 6th year, 6 years, yevel is mafkia, even if he's an avid and they made up with to work 10 or 20 years, so yevel is mafkia. So al derech zeh, if he was an avid and he ran away, so he has to pay back the avdus. So Yevel is mafkia. So al derech zeh, he was an avid and he became ill for 4 years, and l'churi he has to pay back. Nevertheless, the Yevel is mafkia the chiyuv avdus. Now, b'medvar mamurim, that being ill means that you have to be mashal the avdus if you were ill for 4 years. That's talking about b'medvar mamurim shemechashnu liyimei acheli, and memela he has to pay back for the yimei acheli. That's kshahoye chol yekavit she'eni yochel asas malacha. So then you make a cheshbon. If he didn't work for 4 years, so then he has to pay back the malacha. He wasn't so ill. He was able to sew. In other words, he wasn't able to do the regular work that he was normally able to do because of his illness. But he wasn't ill mamish. Is afilu kol kol sheish. Even if he became ill all 6 years, but Lepel, during those 6 years, he was doing lighter work. He wasn't doing heavier work. So then that is considered part of the Aveda, because Ksov that's what he's able to do, and therefore he doesn't have to pay back after he finishes the 6 years. Halacha Vov. Hamoicher atzmi legoy, when a person sells himself to a goy, is imloi nivda, we'll learn the special dinim of P'tiyah, that kroivim could also be paid from a goy, but if he wasn't redeemed from the goy, einu yoytze ele b'yovel. There's no mitzias of going out with shtar, there's no, of sheish rather. This musig of sheish doesn't apply to a goy. By a goy is einu yoytze ele b'yovel. Shnamar v'im yigol be'ela. If he's not nigel be'ela, so then the yotze b'shnas hayevel hu avonavim. So an eved that's sold to a goy remains with the goy until shnas hayevel. Now, what's the din of an eved hanimka legoy? Hanimka halacha zayin hanimka legoy is im lehi siga yogdei legal, if he doesn't have any money to be goyel himself. So the din is kroiv of paid nesa. His kroivim are supposed to be paid him, and the karev kedim, the closest karev, that's the one that has the first din that he should be paid. The shenamar a doidei, a ben doidei yigolena. So doidei is closer than a ben doidei. Doidei is an uncle, and ben doidei is a first cousin. So doidei ben doidei yigolena. So the closer relative is supposed to be paid. Ubezn koifen is kroiv of litvdeisa. There's a chiyuv. It's not only they have a chiyuv. Bezn is koifen, just like a koifen al mitzvahs. I say that there's a chiyuv to do what you're mechuyev to do. Bezn could be koif for a person. So al there is a koifen is kroiv of litvdeisa. Shalei yitama ba'akim begoyim. He shouldn't get mixed up amongst goyim. Lepei leipadul kroiv of eisha in yodem aseges. So then it's a mitzvah. I'll call adam yisrael litvdeisa. It's a mitzvah on everyone else to be paid. L'chatchila, a karev is supposed to be paid there. The closest karev is supposed to be paid there. Lepel, if a karev wasn't paid there, is meisus. It's not a chiyuv al kol adam al derech like by krevim, but on the other end, it's mitzvah al kol adam l'vdeisa. Bein shepadu krevim, bein shepadu sh'ar adam, yatsa lecheres. He goes at lecheres. In other words, he doesn't become an eved of these people that were paid him. Whereas they're paid to him, and he's yatsa lecheres, and the pastor he doesn't owe them anything. That's the number one. And also, v'yeshlei lulves, v'legal is atzmi min agoy. Normally, a person's not supposed to be loiva v'goyel. Ain't loiva v'goyel, like we'll learn. But from a goy, you could be loiva v'goyel, and then there's another din, v'goyel lechatzoin. You could also be goyel lechatzoin. Goyel lechatzoin means you give the goy the money of the way you worth right now, even though you're not going out right now, but you're going to go out earlier. In other words, you make the cheshbon, how much is going to be until Yovel, and then you make the cheshbon, how much money you would have to give him in order to be goyel him, and you can give him part of that money. So even though right now he's still working, but that'll cause that he'll go out earlier, like we'll learn Behemshach. Aval animkal Yisrael, but that's talking about a person that was sold to a goy, the kroivim could be goyel him, and he could be leiva v'goyel, and he's also nigal lechatzoin. Aval animkal Yisrael eina kroivim paid the mesei. The Graven can't be paid the he has to be paid this Atzmi. In other words, the Odin is not mechuyev to take money from the Graven in order to be paid this Evedivri from his Odin or Yisrael. And also the Ein Leva V'Geil, so his Gula has to come through Yasig Yodeh, it's not through borrowing money. And also the Ein Geil Lechatzoin, it can't be Geil Lechatzoin. El Ketzadina, Imi Siga Yodeh. There's somehow or another he got money. Not that the Graven could give him money. The Kraven can give money to become his money, but he got money not through halva, and not that the Kraven are coming to the Yodin, but rather he's coming. And we see the Yodin litain kefi shalom anisaris. He has to give all the money kefi shalom anisaris, like the Rambam will say the Cheshbon Behemshach, is then his nesin v'yetze v'imlav leyetze. Masha'enkin by the goy, all these three dinim are differently. A karev can be paid. That's number one. And also he could be loiva v'goyel, that's number two. And also he could be goyel lechatzoin, which is number three. Halacha ches. Now, echad ha-meicher atzmei bein li-Yisrael bein le-goy, ve'echad she-mechru bezn, is hareze migareya mipidyeni v'yetzis. So in other words, there was a certain price that he was bought for. The Evedivri was bought for a certain price. And now this Evedivri wants to go out. He's able to go out. He's allowed to give the money that he's owed, and knows that he paid for the Avedivri, and Mamela he goes out free. But the din is he doesn't have to pay him the money that he paid, but rather you take off of that money the amount of time that he already worked. That's the taich migareh mipideni v'yetz. And some people want to taina that the pashtus hadvarim would be that since Lepil you bought him as an eved, you have to really l'churi should have to pay for the whole eved, even though the male you bought him for an eved to work for 6 years. And Lepil it's now after 2 years, so l'churi 2 years will gone already. So l'churi the seichel says that you should take it off. But on the other hand, since you paid for him and now he's going out, so there will be a svara to say you have to give him whatever you paid for. Yeah, you have to give him whatever you paid for. But lepel, so that's the Torah Mechadish. No, that you don't. Even though he was bought as an eved, so he was bought as an eved. So now when he wants to go out as an eved, let him pay whatever he was paid for as an eved. So we look at it as if you bought the work. Whereas lepel was only working for 6 years. So mainly you make the cheshbon how much work he would have given you 6 years of work. So mainly we divide the amount of money you paid according to the amount of work that he would have worked, and then we look at each year as being that work. And Mamela now, when you're being paid there, you subtract that amount of money which would be for that amount of work. Like the Rambam make the cheshbon. Nachmal. Echad ha'meicher atzmei bein liyisrael bein legoy ve'echad shemachru bezen. So the din is harezim migareah mipideni v'yetz. So you subtract from the amount of money that he has to use to be paid himself and his yetzer ketzad. Harei shemachru b'shishim dinum. They sold him for shishim dinum, and Lepel is going to work there for 4 years. Va'avar arba shanim, and Lepel l'motzi yodei. And Lepel now he has the money. Is the din is hareza nesen esrim dinum. He only has to give esrim dinum v'yetzer lecheres, because we look at it as if each year was 10 dinum, and maybe he already worked 4 years, so maybe he only owes 20 dinum. No, the deal was it was a mecher atzmei, so he could sell himself for eser shanim. The Rambam again doesn't give an example of less than eser shanim, doesn't give an example of less than 6 years. He gives an example of more than 6 years. So the memela reizim megarei arba dinim l'chol shana shavar. Memela v'neisnan nisr keser v'shavar keser v'yetzer. So again, he can megarei pivdieni by mecher atzmei over there. It could be hechatim of more than 6 years. So memela, whatever the cheshbon is, he's megarei the years that he already worked per the money that each year was worth, and the rest he pays. V'chein hanimka legoy, a person that was sold to a goy. So now is mechashiv hadomim lefi hashonim hanisharis at shnas hayevel. You make the cheshbon according to how many years were left at shnas hayevel. Shenamar v'chishivim kinei mishnas yimochli at shnas hayevel, and you make the cheshbon how much it can be at shnas hayevel. Ketzad mocher atzmi b'mei. Let's say a person sold himself to a goy for 100. The only hechatimtz of selling to a goy is only a mecher atzmi, because Bezin doesn't sell to a goy. And lepeil v'nishar liyevel mishnas mechira eser shanim. So a person sold himself to a guy for 100, and Lepel, there was 10 years left until Yevel. So Melech Chaptas, that every year was a 10. Is Mechashev Asara L'chol Shana Sha'avat, for every year that he worked, he count 10, and V'girei Adam, so you subtract that money, U'meishev Ash'ar Kesef, and over here by a guy, there's a Chumrah, that you have to give him back money, Le'tvor V'le'kelim, Shnama Kesef M'kori. So V'kesef V'nigol Miyad HaGoy, so that's a chumrah by a nimkar legoy than the nimkar yisrael. In other words, by a nimkar yisrael, you could give him also shava kesef. Masha'inkin by a nimkar legoy, you could only give him kesef. And there's another chumrah that by a goy there's only the yitzia of yevel. There's no yitzia of sheish. By a goy there's only yitzia of sheish. Now the tzir of a goy, the Rambam says, how much time was there at shnas hayevel? The emes is that by a mecher atzmei, and alderazeh by a machru bezin, there could also be a hechatimtza of how much time was ad hayevel. The Rambam gave a tzir of mecher atzmei about machru bezin sheishon. That was the tzir that the Rambam said. Machru b'shishim dinim v'avad arba shanim. So the pashtus of machru bezin was it's going to be 6 years. By mecher atzmei, he gave a hechatimtza that could be 10 years. There could be a 10 years. And by a goy, he gives the hechatimtza of ashnas hayevel. L'chure, by a mecher atzmei and al derazeh by a machru bezin, there could also be a hechatimtza of ashnas hayevel. Lepel, the Rambam doesn't say the hechatimtza. It's not necessarily a kasha. But the Rambam doesn't say the hechatimtza of a yid that was sold ashnas hayevel, And lepel l'shnas ha'yevul, let's say in 4 years. So Mele it comes out that it's only going to be in 4 years. That's going to be less than 6. And al derech if he sold himself for 10 years, and it's going to be ad shnas ha'yevul. So we say also ad shnas ha'yevul, he goes out. So the chur over there should also be this din that you megareh according to the cheshbon of shnas ha'yevul. So the Radvaz says a chidush that the emes is that by a yid, even lepel, he sold him in a way that he's going to go out at shnas ha'yevul. But since the pashtus of the sale is not at shnas ha'yevul, the pashtus of the sale is 6 years. It's just that there's going to be a din that he's going to be yetzer b'yevul. So over there we takadon rechaz echud yevul. In other words, even though bepel he's only going to work there 4 years, but lepel, since in Inyan is this, there's going to be a musik that he's going to work there for 6 years. So therefore, you don't rechaz echud shnas ha'yevul. The Rambam Aruch also brings some achreinim from other achreinim that they want to tie it that it's like a gather of afkaita, as we said before. In other words, be'etzem the sale was further. Whereas when a person buy a goy, lechatchila the sale was at shnas ha'yevul. Masha'enkin by a yid, by a mecher atzmei, even machru bezdin. So the sale was whatever they made up. Either whatever they made up, or by machru bezdin, it's a sale for 6 years. It's just that there's another din that Yovel is mafkia. No, Yovel is mafkia, the existing chiyuv. But since be'etzim there's a chiyuv for later, so therefore the giroin only goes according to the original chiyuv, not according to this din of Yovel, which is only a superimposed hafkah on the original chiyuv. That's a chidush and pshat. I mean, it doesn't say clearly in Rambam that in such a tzir there won't be a din of a cheshbon. In other words, the Rambam doesn't say it. The Rambam gives a tzir of a machru bezn of 6 years, and a mecher atzmi of 10 years, and a mecher to a goy of achnas ha'yevul. It doesn't say clearly that by a yid there's no din of a yevul, but on the other hand, there are advances medaik that by a yid there wouldn't be such a din of making a cheshbon achnas ha'yevul. Halachates. Kol eved ivri or ivriya sheyotza b'geroin kesef. Lepel, he's going out b'geroin kesef. She's going out b'geroin kesef. And lepel v'hivri v'hesev domi. No, you paid the value that you paid for him when you bought him was in a certain value. And now he's worth more. In other words, when you paid for him for 6 years, you paid for him lamazong 60, so it's 10 per year. But now, if you evaluate how much he's worth now, he's worth more than 10 per year. He's worth 20 per year. He became weaker, he became thinner, weaker, and Mamela now he's worth less. So now if you'd pay for him less. And now the question is, how much does the Eved Ivri have to give the Odin for the remaining years? So the din is, mechashvin loy lahakalov. So you always go lahakal on the Eved Ivri. If he was originally sold for 100, variyata shavim masayim, and right now he's worth already 200, is any mechashav madena v'alulfi. If he makes the cheshbon, how knows that he was sold for meya, memela how much was each year worth. So even though right now Bam is the year that he has left, he's worth more. But lepel, since he only paid for it according to the cheshbon of meya, so memela he only has to pay him according to that cheshbon. If originally he was worth more and he was sold for masayim, vareu shavim meya, but right now according to the cheshbon he's only worth meya. Is mechashev imi al pi hashan manisaris lefi meya. So the marshal, if he was originally worth 100, I'm sorry, he was originally worth 200, and lepel he paid for him 200. Let's say he made a cheshbon 200 for 6 years. So mele now there's 3 years left. So the chura 200 for 6 years. So for 3 years there should be 100. But now, if he would be sold now for 6 years, he would only be worth 100. So you don't have to give 100 for the next 3 years over here. Now you can give him just 50 for the next 3 years. Halacha Yud. Hanimka l'goy, someone that was sold to a goy, is hail v'yesh legal atzmi l'chatzoin k'mesha b'yarnu. He could redeem himself l'chatzoin, which means he's not redeeming himself from now until Yovel, but he's only redeeming himself for half of that time, and that time will obviously be later time. Right now he's still working, but he's giving him money to redeem the later time. Is pamim yeh lahakal pam lahachmer. Sometimes it'll be lahakal, it'll be an advantage for the Eved, and sometimes it'll be lahachmer faket, it'll be for his detriment. Ketzad lahakal. Roskana esib masayim. The Odin paid for this Eved masayim. At that point in time, he was worth masayim. And lepel v'nishchaf. And lepel, he became weaker. Vareu ata shavim meya. Now this Eved is only worth 100. And lepel v'noslei chamishim chatzi domov. And he gave him here. As he says, you gave from me 200, but lepel right now I'm only worth 100. And memele half of my time is really only worth 50. Half of my time is only worth 50. Memela, I'm giving you 50 now. So in other words, let's say, l'chatchila, the deal was that he's going to have him for 10 years. 10 years. And he paid him, because that's 10 years till Yevel. He paid 200 for those 10 years. So l'chura, the cheshbon is 20 per year. 20 per year. But the pill right now, he's only worth 100 for 10 years. So now we went ahead and paid him 50. So Memela, through 50, he has, because he's only worth 5 per year. He's only worth, originally he was worth 20 per year, but now he's only worth 10 per year. So since he only worth, and he gave him 50, so 50 is enough to redeem 5 years. V'nosli chamishim chatzi domav, and he gave him 50, which is chatzi domav of what he was paid for originally. And now the Hivri, now he's worth more. Is in Vareu Shavim Masayim. And now he wants to redeem himself from now he got more money. So Nesli Meyash in Chatzi Domav. In other words, it's all in the beginning. He's still in the beginning. In other words, in the beginning he paid for him 200. And now, right after that, he became weaker. And then now he's giving him 50 out of 50. And through those 50, he gained 5 years of that chiyuv to work. So that 5 years before Yevel, he's not going to have to work. And now he's back to work worth 200. So Lepel now, all he has to do is add another 100, because he has to add a half. A half already is paid for, and a half he has to add. That would be for his benefit, because Lepel he paid 50, and through that he got more. What would the idea of Lechatzoin be Lachmer? He bought him from Masayim, and he went ahead and gave him 100, which is only going to carry 50% of him. So in other words, it's going to save him the last 5 years before Yevel. Now Lepel v'nishchaf, and Lepel now he's weaker, and now he's only worth 100. Lepel, he paid him already 100, but when he paid him 100, he was worth 200. And that 100 only went for 5 years. Now he became weaker, and he's worth 100. So now, so now all he has to give him 50, because Lepel, the first 100 only took care of half. But so right now he owes another half. But since he was nishchaf, so 50 will be enough. Now, if he wouldn't have been nigel lechatzoin, so those 100 that he gave wasn't really anything. It was a deposit. It was something, a deposit which that person was really belonged still to the Eved, because Lepel he wasn't kenel lechatzoin. So right now, when he was nishchaf, he could tell him, "Listen, I gave you 100. Now those 100 you were holding on to, but Lepel it didn't work. So Memela, now I want that 100 to should go out free." So let's say if he would have gone to a Yisrael, if it would have been an Evish and Nimkal Yisrael, then the same story would have happened, and he would have given 100 to cover 50% of it. So we would have said, "Listen, it didn't really cover 50% of it." So Memela, now that he was nishchaf, and the whole 100% is only worth 100, so you could say, "Listen, that 100 that I gave you, which is lying by you, let's use that, and that'll be the pidyon. Memela will go out free." Mashenk, and if it was a goy, since he was nigel lechatzoin, so those 100 bought him 50% of the time, but Lepel, the 50% of the time cost him 100. And now that he's worth less, so for the less he can get 50%. He'll get only for 50. Halacha Yudalef. Harav shemocha le'eved ala kesef shenisha le'lavid kinegdei. So in other words, the Eved owes him work, and now the Rab wants to be Meichel. He wants to be Meichel. Says, instead of you give me the money, in other words, if you'll give me the money, so then you won't have to work for me. So yeah, I'm Meichel you the money. I'm Meichel Melkili, you gave me the money. So the din is name, Eini Mochalei, Achiyichtel Ishtar Shikhr. In other words, an Eved, you own an Eved. So since you own an Eved, so you have to have a shtar. So the Eved there has to be a kinyan in order for the Eved to become free. Either the kinyan happens through the Eved giving him money, so that's the pidyon when he gives him money, so he's paid this atzmei with money, or through the fact that the Adon writes him a shtar shikhr without pidyon. The Adon can write him a shtar shikhr, but just for the Adon to be moichel, that's not going to be a ma'aseh kinyan that the Eved should be kohen himself. And v'avad shonish nisayim v'amalei sha'ar hadam mechulum l'chalech l'darkecha. You don't have to pay me anything more. Is le'niftem mishibudei. So he's still an Eved, he still has a shibud because he has an Eved. An Eved is a kinyan avdus which doesn't go off through mechila of the Adon. It only goes off through the fact that either he paid the Adon or the Adon wrote him a shtar shikhr. Halacha Yud Beis. Odin shemes. If an Odin owns a Eved Ivri and he dies, is imi niach ben zocher. If he left over a ben zocher, is that a Eved haben at seif hashesh. So then he has to continue working for the ben. So the ben is yoirish Eved Ivri. Oy at seif hashonim shemacher atzmilam. Until the end of the years, which macher atzmilam. There's by a mecher atzmei, so he could make himself a more than shesh. Oy achiv could be able. That's another option. You could be able. Oy achiv garim pidyenim yitnasha. So these are all the options of how an Eved Ivri will go out, either after shesh or after the years that he sold himself for, or ad hayevel, or achiv garim pidyenim yitnasha. That's talking about if the Odin left a ben zocher. Avon lehineh ben zocher, he didn't leave as ben zocher. So then is areze yetzel lecheres. So the Eved Ivri is yetzel lecheres ve'ena Eved leis abbas. Even if he left a daughter, he's not Eved. V'leis ach ve'en tzerich leim she'ena Eved shara yorshim. In other words, the further yorshim for sure, he's not Eved. That's talking about when he was sold to a regular Yisrael. So again, if the Yisrael left a ben, so then he's Eved the ben. Masha'enkin, if he didn't leave a ben, even if he left a bas or other yorshim, so he's not Eved them. It says, "V'hanimkar leger tzedek legoy." If a person sold to a ger, which is a yid, or to a goy, as afilo haben en yevet, he doesn't even go for this ger tzedek's son. Elekivin shemes odin yetzi lecher. So even though he's taka a son, and he's a yerish, a emes a yerish of the ger tzedek, but we have a special limud that teaches us that he's not oived the ben of a ger tzedek, and also not lahavdil the ben of a goy. Nimtzas Eimer, she'Eved Ivri nikne bekesev b'shtar. An Eved Ivri, when you acquire the Eved Ivri, to be koiner the Eved Ivri, could either be bekesev b'shtar, you give the Eved kesef, or the Eved writes a shtar. And the koines atzmi b'chamisha dvarim. In order for an Eved to go free, it could be b'chamisha dvarim, either b'shanim, when it comes either the 6 years, or whatever years you make up by a mechrul mecher atzmei. Oy be yovel when it comes shnas hayevel, so regardless, yovel is always moitzi. Ey be geroin kesef by giving the odin kesef. That's geroin kesef means taking off the kesef, but it means being paid to himself by giving him the money. But when you give him the money, you megareya the years that he already worked. Oy b'shtar shichrur, either the odin giving him a shtar shichrur, oy b'misus odin b'lei ben, or by the odin dying if he didn't leave over a son. Ubegoy, beger, if he is owned by a goy or a ger, is afilo hiniach ben, even if hiniach ben. Now that's how he's kein atzman. Now then the Ram says nochadin mitzvah leimol itzei b'shas yisiyosef. When the Eved goes out free, regardless of how he went out free, obviously not talking about when the Odin died. Masha'enkin, when he goes out free, so there's a din that he has to say tzei b'shas yisiyosef. Aval pishuli omerle is nevertheless harehu yetzi bechinam. He'll pay his yetzi. Ve'in tzorich shtar. There's no need for a shtar. Afilu chola v'hoitzi rabbi olav hitzois harbis is einei chayev leklum. Shnemer yetzi lachov shichinam. So once the Eved finishes his yimei avdus, is yetzi lachov. But lepeil lechatchila is mitzvah leima letzei. The Odin should tell the Eved say.